Hi everyone, and welcome to today's DonorScape training webinar for professionals. I'm Anthony Hale from the marketing team here at GGNA, and we're really excited for you to join us. Before we begin, I just want to go over some technical details. We ask that if you can, please log into WebEx before dialing in. Once you launch the webinar, then a window will appear on your screen similar to what you're seeing in slide 1. If you've already called in, please hang up and follow the instructions in the window to dial in. Then we'll be able to associate your phone with your name. Next, we may ask some yes or no questions during the session. Please look at the slide on the screen to see where you can answer yes or no. Also, notice the raise your hand feature. During the session, your phone will be muted. If you want to ask Kat or Joe a question directly, please raise your hand and that will signal to me that you want to ask them a question. We also encourage you to use the chat panel to ask any questions. It's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please notice that we ask you to direct your questions to all panelists so that the presenters and I can see it and field that question. We hope to have a brief period at the end for questions, but if we don't get to that, we will record all of your questions and send them out in a follow-up email with answers from Kat and Joe. If at any time during the webinar you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please send me an email at ahoell@grensglier.com or call our meeting provider WebEx directly at 866-229-3239. That's 866-229-3239. With that, I want to introduce our presenters today. Prior to GGNA, Joe Calger was most recently served as Director of Development Services at University Hospitals of Cleveland. There he was responsible for gift and data processing, reporting, prospect management and research, and process improvement. Joe previously served as Associate Chairman and Campaign Manager for Cleveland Clinic and Associate Vice President, Information Services for Case Western Reserve University. Prior to moving to Ohio, Joseph served in advancement service leadership roles at the University of California, Davis and the University of California, San Diego. And Joseph is being interviewed today by Kat Banakis, Director of Strategic Implementation for GGNA Analytics.
Thank you so very much, Anthony. Hi, everyone. This is Kat Banakis here at GGNA, and I am delighted to be joined today by Joseph Calger. And we are going to be talking today about building a real-time affinity score as part of our Flash series for the GGNA webinar series. And we're going to stick to that 20-minute time frame, so thank you for spending these few minutes with us. And Joseph, this is an exciting and important topic around how to triage prospects as they come in or have already been in, so that you're really targeting the most important people. And capacity is certainly part of this, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about how to assess inclination and how to get to that other piece of things.
Sure. Thanks, Kat, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. You're right. That's definitely the challenge. I don't think any of us are in a position to say that we have all the resources we would need to contact and work with every single prospect that we have or have identified. So we have to be smart about how we target them and who we talk to. And you're right. Potential is definitely a big part of the potential of a prospect is definitely about capacity and inclination. Capacity we could talk about another day. Today, let's talk a little bit about inclination. Really two components to that, if you think about it. There's their philanthropic inclination generally. Are they just a generous philanthropic sort of person? That's a really hard one to assess, certainly based on just the information you have. But you probably have a fair amount of information already about their inclination to connect to your institution. And today we want to talk about one of the ways to look at that, because the best predictor of somebody's future action is their past actions, what they've already done. And an affinity score is about looking at what you already know about someone that indicates how strong their connection is to you.
And what population would you say that this is most appropriate for? Are we talking about all records that one would have in a database, incoming records? What do you think?
Sure. Well, depending on your purpose, you could use an affinity score in a lot of different scenarios. You can use it at an annual giving level to just decide which populations might get an extra mailing a year, or people that you might want to invite to participate in some new initiative because they've already been connected in some other way, all the way up to major and principal giving, where you may have a sense that someone has capacity based on some wealth screening or other work that you've done, but need to figure out which wealthy prospects to target first. So it really could be used across the board in your advancement activities.
And how complicated are we talking?
Well, you can make it as complicated as you want. Affinity models and scores can vary from very simple ones to very complex. The very simplest ones, actually, we probably already know about every day. An annual giving segmentation model is an affinity score of sorts. We look at, well, you're a donor or a non-donor. You gave in the last year, or not not since 3 years ago, or how much you've given. So those would be some of the simplest ones. Typically what you're seeing in the simplest models is that there's a small number of variables, maybe just your amount of giving as one variable in an affinity model. It's internal data that you already own. You don't have to go out. Doesn't have to be restructured. It's stuff you already collect for some other purpose. You might base it on assumptions and general knowledge. Say, well, if somebody's been a donor in the past, they're more likely to be a donor in the future, or they're connected to us because they've written us a check. So that feels good. But you can get very, very complex. You can have models that sort of they might even cross over into the predictive modeling area, but models that have a large number of variables that are internal data and external data, and you start looking at models that you do regression analysis to see which variables actually are correlated with a change in behavior or different levels of behavior, and so it can get very sophisticated.
So, but across the board, you're talking about some sort of point system towards affinity that, from the simplest, you'd be starting with the data that you have, attributing some amount of points to giving, some amount of points to involvement relationship, and then if you wanted to get much more complex, you could regress out and weight those points differently. Correct.
Lots of room to start with something, say, fairly simple, just to try to stratify a little bit, and then refine your model with some actual data analysis, adding additional variables, looking at how well it fits reality, just like any theory of, anything in nature. You come up with a theory, you try it out, see how it matches with reality, and then adjust as you need to until you have more sophisticated and more accurate models.
And in your past experiences, have you seen this put into practice?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, all of us are familiar with one of the simplest forms of an affinity score, which is looking at annual fund segmentation. That is an affinity score of sorts. We don't assign necessarily points to it, but we break people out in these categories because we think we want to treat them in slightly different ways. I've put together models, mostly simple models, in an arts environment, in a healthcare environment, in a higher education environment, all the way from an annual giving look up to major giving. Most recently worked with a client of the firm who had asked us to come up with a model to develop an affinity score, and through the great work of my colleagues on the analytics side, they developed this terrific weighted model using the typical things that you would think about. The good old recency, frequency, money model, the RFM model, adding in then a little bit about volunteer activity. And so they had put together that model and done some scoring, and then we did something really sort of unusual and fun with that.
And what was unusual and fun about it?
Well, what we did with them is say, you know, a model and a score is great, but the things that we were including in the model, you know, giving history, particularly recent giving being the strongest indicator of affinity, well, that changes every day. Every day, every one of our organizations gets new gifts. And so
Sure.
that changes the character of the relationship according to the model every single day. You know, volunteer activity and other sorts of things change less often, but they still change periodically. So, you know, one of the key things and the fun thing that we did, if you will, is to look at ways to create a methodology for the score to be updated on a regular basis, and do it easily and do it independently of any outside help, but actually be able to have someone in-house update the scores on a regular basis.
You know, what I really like about this is I work with prospect research departments quite a bit. And what this real-time affinity score does, even if it's not real-time, but something like this, gives a really helpful layer on top of capacity for who it's actually worth researching in terms of possible board memberships, possible involvement into deeper dives into major gift portfolios, that the two things together provides a degree of insulation against just buying zip codes or looking at license plates or something like that, that these people seem wealthy, maybe they are good, but rather provides an additional layer for who you might do a deeper dive on that's less than predictive modeling, but does allow that same sort of who gets through the door.
Right, right. And a lot of this is very much common. This is common sense of what we already know as professionals in the field, and just being rigorous and structured about it. Saying, I know that if somebody makes a $500 gift, and they've never done that before, maybe I should take a look and say, wow, $500 gift, that's significant. Let's take a look at their capacity and see whether they need to be moved up the chain. And I can do that by monitoring the gift log, but I could also have a scoring model that takes into account not only that, but other activity, volunteer and event activity and so on, and have it prompt me for the less obvious ones, or just make sure that I'm covering all my bases there. Again, it's a question of how we apply limited resources. If we have resources to do full research profiles and send an officer out to see everybody who's ever attended our school or come to our museum or had a procedure done at our healthcare institution, great. But we're not in that position, so we have to choose. And even choosing between two donors with similar, let's say, similar capacity ratings, you know, $200,000 prospects. Which one do I see first? Well, the one who's given some gifts, the one who's expressed some volunteer interest, and on and on. You know, and of course, we're really talking about ways to take hundreds or thousands of records and figure out which ones to hit first, not just one or two. One or two I could do by myself. Thousands, I need help from a computer.
Right. And how difficult and complicated would you say was that automated bolt-on process? That it's running every night, you do it, was that a colossal endeavor to build? Right.
So the process that we built for this client, they were a Razor's Edge client, and in the Razor's Edge environment, and given the variables that were part of the calculation, we decided against sort of a real-time, as soon as I pull up somebody's record, it's going to calculate the score. Two reasons for it. First of all, we were concerned about performance, and also concerned about the idea that, well, why would I recalculate every single time I open up a record? For most people, their score hasn't changed. So if it recalculates every time, then I'm putting a performance hit for no good reason. So what we ended up doing was designing something that had two options for how to update. One would be a comprehensive update of all scores for all constituents in the database, and one would be, let's just update the scores for people who gave a gift in the last whatever period of time, day, week, month. Up to the client. They could start out once a week, and if they found that was enough for them, stick with it. Go longer, go shorter, it would be fine. And it was really a three-step process of an extract from Razor's Edge, pulling all of the data that was needed, and the old score. A little process in Microsoft Access, very straightforward, pretty simple, to calculate the new score for anybody who was in that input file. Then a comparison to say, well, is the new score different than the old score? If it's not, then I don't need to do anything, I'm done. So pull out all those people have a new score, and we'll go ahead and, or never had a score before and now have one, put it into an import file and bring it on in. So it's not completely automated. There's a step to run an extract, a step to do the calculation, and a step to do the import, but very straightforward, no manual entry involved, very, very simple and easy, very quick, especially the daily or weekly process where you might have a few hundred records, just quick and easy.
Great. We have about 2 minutes left, and I'm just going to pause and see if we have any questions coming in here. So if you have any questions, we will look at them quickly. Okay, we have one question from a listener who is starting this process on their own and would be interested in sharing some models and formulas with other users. So if any of you would like to do that following this call, I would be absolutely happy to put you two in touch, or three, directly with one another to model share on that. And we have an additional question here about variables to consider other than giving. And I know that in the example that we were talking about just now, the real-time example you were talking about, Joseph, one of the factors we looked at was, in addition to the RFM, looking at relationship to the institution. So involvement, type of relationship, board membership, and that made it a bit more nuanced than straight giving. What are other non-monetary factors that you would consider and weight them?
Sure. So, there are a number of different things, and depending on your environment, you choose different variables. Certainly, volunteer activity. Are they on the board? Are they on the leadership committee? Are they a volunteer in your gift shop? Are they, do they, help out at events? Do they come to events would be another one. In a college university environment, are they an alum? How many degrees do they have? Is their spouse an alum? I seem to remember many, many years ago looking at even family relationships, that if somebody has parents and grandparents that were alumni, that the relationship of the whole family is that much stronger. So you can do quite a lot just with the regular data that you would manage, but certainly anything that has your prospect demonstrating their connection to your organization through their own action. Time and treasure, and talent. All three of those are things that you know about and can incorporate into a score.
Great. Just to do a quick plug for the future, we're going to be having a more detailed case study of this coming out in the winter GG&A quarterly review, which you, if you are a GG&A client, will get in the mail, or you're welcome to have on our website. The next session of this is going to be speedy research verification with Jennifer Filla of Aspire Research, talking about how to do basic verification of prospect profiles in as little time as possible. So please do join us for that Thursday, December 4th. If any of you, again, would like to share formulas with one another, please contact me directly. And that is kbanakis@grensglier.com. And if any of you have any other questions, we'll take them and respond to you all by email. And I just thank you so much, Joseph, for your time today. This has been wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the group?
That should do it. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time, and look forward to hearing any questions or any ways we can help.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. And Joseph and I will stay online for a few minutes if you want to send us some questions directly in the chat.